We think being an employee is just as honorable as being an entrepreneur, and being a business owner is just as honorable as both. And if you're somebody who wants to set your business aside for a while and take some orders for that guaranteed or dedicated paycheck, no harm, no foul. You don't owe anybody anything, right? Like, you get to feed your family in whatever way makes sense for you.
Are you feeling overwhelmed, stuck, or uncertain about how to grow your business without sacrificing what really matters most? Welcome to The Business You Really Want, the show for women ready to build a sustainable, fully aligned business. Aligned with what, you ask? You, your values, your life. Seriously, it is possible. I'm Tonya Kubo, and along with business advisor extraordinaire Gwen Bortner, we're here to show you how.
Okay, it is, if you're listening in real time, March 3rd, 2026, which means we are at the tail end of Q1. And we are in the tail end of Q1 in the year that follows quite the year. Let's just say unprecedented, right, is probably the word of the last 5 years or so. And it continues. It continues to fit. Yeah. Topic of today, though, is a question that Gwen and I are both, we're not hearing people specifically ask the question, but we're seeing people take action that means that at least they have internally asked the question. And that is, are you really cut out for this entrepreneur gig? And if the answer, hold on, no interrupting, just hold your finger, because I'm turning it over to you in a second. And the question of whether you're cut out for this or not is actually a neutral question, right? If the answer is no, it doesn't necessarily mean you're a big fat failure. All right. And with that, because I think Gwen's going to hyperventilate if I don't turn it over to her shortly. Gwen, why don't you go ahead and just spew what you were about to say before I did not let you interrupt?
Well, and because what I was going to say is I was in a conversation with several other business owners, most of whom are all focused around kind of the operations topic. And this came up because one of the folks was talking about things, and I said this, and as soon as I got off the call, I got on the call with Tonya, and I said, okay, we actually need to make a podcast about this, because part of the goal of this podcast is to say the things that we talk about privately that need to be said in public. And the topic was, do you actually need to be running a business right now, or do you just need to do a thing that's allowing you the flexibility and making the money that you need to make so that you can do whatever this other thing is that you actually want to do, instead of trying to force everything into this entrepreneurial box. And as we asked the question, I confessed, and then Tonya confessed, so it's going to be a big confession show. Exactly, big tears. That I ask myself this question quite often. Mm-hmm. Is, do I actually want to be an entrepreneur? Do I want to be developing and building and running my own business? Or do I want to be an employee? And one of the reasons I feel like I'm really good at being an advisor is I've played all sides of the equation, and I enjoyed them all. It wasn't like, oh my God, working for corporate was the worst thing ever. It was, like that wasn't my experience. Real entrepreneurs, in the end, that's almost always how they feel. Mm-hmm. Like, they're like, corporate is the absolute death nail of my life. Part of the conversation that I was having in the small group and that we were having is, we have made it seem like being an entrepreneur somehow is more honorable. I mean, we can put all sorts of adjectives around it, but somehow it's way more honorable than being an employee, mm-hmm. than working a job. And that is such a lie. That there is nothing true about that statement. And so what I think happens is a lot of people go down an entrepreneurial path that weren't actually cut out to be an entrepreneur. And there are some people who absolutely are entrepreneurs. Everything about how they approach everything is entrepreneurial, right? And I would put myself in the category of a very official title of, well, sort of. Yeah, well, sort of. There are aspects that that are very entrepreneurial about me, but there's very much aspects that are what I would call, I want to be an employee. And I'm okay with that. But I would not ever hold myself up as an example of a true entrepreneur. Right.
And why is that? What are those qualities?
Well, first is that the definition of risk almost doesn't make sense to most people. But I am relatively risk averse. Right. Real entrepreneurs almost are zero risk averse. Right. They're willing to try and everything. The next thing, and there are going to be people who want to argue with me about this, and I am okay with that, is I think real entrepreneurs love the idea of the sales and the marketing aspect of whatever it is that they're doing. I rarely come across truly successful entrepreneurs who don't love a lot of the sales and marketing aspects of their business, and often is the place where they want to spend the most time. I am much more likely to see salespeople from a corporate environment become really successful entrepreneurs than, the admin people in the people, like an HR person or an accountant.
Right.
Right. Leaving a corporate environment and becoming successful entrepreneur, typically, because that's such a huge part of the job for so long of doing the sales and the marketing. And you and I, we've talked about it. It's very clear. That is not I like doing the sales. I don't like doing the marketing. And I think it's both of those pieces that are really, like I said, every person I've ever met that's truly an entrepreneur, that they love that. And they never think they're that, well, not never, but they often don't think they're that good at it. But when you look, it's like, no, this is what you live, eat, and breathe.
Right.
All the time. So I think that's also an element of it. The other is the ability for what I'm going to call full flexibility. Like very few things derail them. And
you're talking about entrepreneurs.
Yeah, entrepreneurs. Very few things derail real entrepreneurs. Because if you look at anybody's stories, that you read and listen to very, very many times, most of the ones that we know, that we put names to, that we have success, have failed like spectacularly, right? Like bankruptcy failed multiple times before they succeeded. And so all of that is like, okay, yep, just another day. I mean, my current favorite, only because he's now been doing this for so long, and a lot of people know who he is Dan Sullivan, who's the founder of Strategic Coach. He talks about that he filed his divorce papers and bankruptcy the same day, which was basically before he founded Strategic Coach. And within a year or two, he had Strategic Coach, the basis of what became Strategic Coach, going. And it's now been going for a really long time. But he was okay spectacularly failing, right? And then the last one I would say is ambition, true ambition, always growing, always stretching, always challenge, always, that I want to be at the top. I want to be the best. I want to be all of those things. And I'm willing to do all of the things that need to go with it, is also part of entrepreneurship. I was talking with one of our clients who is absolutely an entrepreneur, and she's like, oh yeah, no, if I sell these 2 businesses, she says, I'm not retiring. I'm just figuring out what is the next, 2 or 3 businesses to start and do.
Right.
And I have zero doubt of it. And Dan Sullivan, actually, that's his current thing he's talking a lot about, is that how do you continue to channel your ambition as you get older and older and older? Because real entrepreneurs will continue to be ambitious even in their 70s, 80s, and 90s.
Right.
Right. And so when you start saying some of those things and you start thinking to yourself like, oh, maybe I'm not an entrepreneur. Now, it doesn't mean you can't be a business owner. It doesn't mean that you can't do this. But I think it's also important to say, but maybe you're trying to fit your square peg into someone else's round hole.
So you're going to have to explain to me the difference then, because, I think most people equate entrepreneur and business owner as the same. And you're saying, well, you might not be an entrepreneur, but that doesn't mean you can't be a business owner. Make it make sense, Gwen.
So business owners are, and or CEOs are dealing with the ongoing issues of owning a business. Okay. Now, in our environment, because a lot of the folks that we talk to are relatively small businesses, it does make sense to, because they've often started it from scratch, all of those things. So it feels very, very similar, but it's important to realize that maybe you're not really truly an entrepreneur, but you are a business owner. It's the same thing as thinking about CEOs. The person who runs Coca-Cola is not an entrepreneur. They're a CEO.
Yeah, that's their job. Their job is to run Coca-Cola, and their job
is to run Coca-Cola.
They might take a job elsewhere. And of course, if you're a follower of Mike Michalowicz, this is really the whole basis of Profit First, is that a lot of entrepreneurs don't understand the difference between being a founder, a CEO, a director, right? And
a business owner.
Yeah, they don't know how to pay themselves appropriately or how that should all work out.
Right. But most entrepreneurs don't want to be at all involved in the day-to-day operations in any way, shape, or form.
So what do they want? They just want to start businesses and
they want to
sell them and market them.
They want to have ideas. They want to market them. They want to design things. They want to come up, they want to be inventive. They want to come up with IP, intellectual property. They want to stay at a very, very high level. They will get into the weeds to get it off the ground, but that does not satisfy them for very long.
Right.
It's one of those things that as soon as the puzzle piece is figured out, they're ready to move on.
Okay. All right. So I think we've spent a lot of time in talking about what makes an entrepreneur, right? It's that. So you said in your experience, it sounds to me like they're visionaries. They like to start things. They like to create. They like to get things up off the ground. They are truly flexible. At first I thought, what you're really saying is they're resilient, but it's different because there's resiliency that's required for employees too. Oh. But it's that full flexibility. Like, okay, so you're going to throw a challenge at me. It's another day that ends in Y. We'll figure this out.
Right.
They have that true ambition. Even if they weren't doing this, they would be doing something else that would be similar to this.
Yeah.
They would not be doing this or serving up drinks at the local Starbucks. Like, that's not where they're wired. Employees, so far, kind of like what makes that employee mindset, you'd mentioned risk averse. I would say not necessarily risk averse, but I do think that people who are made to be employees place a high level of value in security and stability.
Yes.
Where I see an employee struggle as an entrepreneur most is the natural roller coaster that comes with business. And it's something that our mutual friend Rachel Allen talks about is, if you're just in it to make money, if that's why you did that, there are so many easier ways to make a 6-figure salary than entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is hard. It is a constant rinse and repeat spin cycle sort of thing. You're always having to reinvent yourself as the market does, right? It's not, when you were talking about like accountants and bookkeepers, I think the thing with the employee is a lot of employees say, I like change. I like environments. Yes, but they also tend to like knowing what they're doing today. And as
They
an
also
entrepreneur, you don't.
how much their paycheck is going to be.
Right, exactly. It's like knowing what you're doing today and knowing what the price is for that. I always joke that when people ask me if I miss university life, and I say, well, miss the people. And I think when you're talking to anybody who's been in a different field, a lot of times that is the answer. I miss the people. I don't necessarily miss the work. Or I miss the people. I don't miss the red tape or blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I miss the people. And the other thing I do miss is having a bad day or having a day where I'm just not firing on all cylinders and knowing that I made the same amount of money to stare at the wall for half the day as I did to do my best work. Now, I don't miss making the same amount of money doing my best work as Joe Schmo down the hall who stared at the wall 4 out of 5 days every week. I don't miss that part, right?
Right.
So there is an amount of stability that is intrinsic with an employee relationship. And I know, I'm just going to get ahead of the letter writers here. Okay. You can be laid off at any time. Yes, you can. Okay. But there is almost always another job where that one came from.
I was going to go the exact same place that you did, because that's my favorite lie that's out there, where people are like, oh, you have complete control over everything when you have your own business, when you're an entrepreneur. And it's like, that is the biggest lie on the planet, because the thing that you have zero control over is how many people are going to actually buy your product or service. You can't make anybody buy your product or service. And so you really have way less control over your income than you do as an employee. Yes, you could get laid off, but it's really easy to say, oh, I've got 100 clients, and all of a sudden say, I have 0 clients. Because you can't control whether or not they're going to pay you. Or you can say, I have 100 clients, but oh my gosh, none of them have paid me on time. I'm expecting to get, $50,000 in, and I've got none of it, and I can't make them pay me. You can send letters and you can do all the things, but you can't make them pay.
Right. Well, it's like, as a service provider, this is something, somebody was asking me like, oh, how's business been? And I was like, well, I'm a service provider. My business generally goes really, really well because I provide a good service to people. However, my business success is 100% dependent on my client's success. And 2025 was a really hard year for a lot of my clients. Right? It wasn't like my clients were bailing because they found cheaper, better services elsewhere. My clients were scaling back because their businesses were struggling. That is 2 entirely different things, right?
Right.
And my clients were really good at the stuff that they did, but the market shifted. That's all. Yeah. And they, some of them were faster to respond to the shifts in the market than others. But what I really want to talk about today, because I think this is great at unpacking, but what I really want to talk about, and I think this is what you would rather talk about too, Gwen, is this fairy tale that we have made up about entrepreneurship being somehow more, not altruistic, but somehow more pure, more beneficial, better. Let's just say entrepreneurship is better than employeeship. Totally made up that word. Okay, don't go look it up in the dictionary. Don't write in and tell me how it's not a word. I know it's not a word, but it works for me, right? That it's somehow superior to being an employee.
So I'm going to start with mine, and then I'm going to ask you, because I know we talk about this a lot. So one of the things that I see is like, well, because I can, I'll make sure that I don't do any of the bad things, whatever we're defining as bad things, right? That list is long. That happens, in corporate America, right? And it's like, okay, yeah, that's true. But there's also a lot of businesses out there that don't do the bad things, whatever you're talking. And as you become an entrepreneur and a business owner, and if you start bringing in anybody working for you, all of a sudden you start understanding why some of these quote unquote bad things have to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Sometimes it's the law. You know, I mean, you know, sometimes that you're like, oh, well, I don't have to do that. And it's like, well, you do now because you actually have an employee, and, you know, and because of this, you have to do these things. Sometimes, you know, one of my favorites is when people are like, I can't believe this has happened with this company. And it's like, they brought in investors. The investors are all focused on the money, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've given up on, you know, the altruistic nature of what we're doing, right? So sometimes all of these things are true. But my answer is there's enough options out there that you can find things that will meet your criteria of what the culture needs to be like, what the purpose needs to be, why we're doing the things that we're doing. And so that whole idea of, you know, I'm doing it because of, you know, all of these great reasons, you know, is one issue. I've got several more, but I'm curious, give me one of yours, Tonya.
So I think there is a lot of pressure to be living out our highest purpose, and a belief that you cannot live out your highest purpose as an employee, that being an entrepreneur is the only way to fulfill your highest purpose in life. And my issue with that, and this could be an age thing too. Maybe it's just the older I get, the more I see that there is no perfect one-size-fits-all solution. But my issue with that is who's to say that your highest purpose has anything to do with your work?
Right.
Right? It's like there's this interesting, I don't know, American, like work yourself to the bone.
It's that
value judgment. Yeah, it's this value judgment that my work has to be connected to my highest purpose. And it reminds me of, you know, I tried self-employment for a period of time after I had my first. There's like 4.5 years between my first and my second. And the idea was I would do this self-employment thing while I had my baby so I could have as much time off as I wanted. Ha ha ha. You don't actually get a ton of time off. Self-employed when you have kids. And then when baby number 2 refused to stinking appear on my timeline, I was like, fine, forget it. I'll just go back to work, you know, kind of get all those things that employee life gets you the 401k and the, you know, the 529 plan and the matching and all these things. And it made sense. And when I went back, I remember people from my consulting life who, you know, would be like, oh, you know, are you enjoying it? I'd be like, yeah, it's okay. And they're like, oh, you must, you know, this must be what you really love. And I was like, I can't say that I really love it, but I can say I'm really good at it. And so if they're willing to pay me this wage to do something I'm naturally really good at, and they honor their end of the bargain of telling me I only have to work from 8 to 5. And at that time, it was a remote gig, which you could not get back in 2012 in my field. It was like, then actually, I feel like I'm getting the longer end of the stick at this point. Now, very quickly, because remote gigs were so rare, right? They very quickly found office space for me and then insisted that I was in the office. First it was 2 days a week and then it was 5 days a week. And then my, 9 to 5, I got a new boss who they determined loyalty by how many all-nighters you pulled. And they were somebody who wanted work to be your hobby and work to be your whole life. They didn't have the work-life balance focus that my prior supervisor had, right? And so while in 2012, that job 100% fit what I needed and what I wanted out of life right then and right there, it didn't come 2019. But it wasn't because I wasn't necessarily filling my highest purpose either, right? It had to do with what I wanted out of the deal. I was no longer getting out of the deal. And circumstances had changed, and entrepreneurship gave me a better option at getting what I wanted out of the deal. But I think really what it comes down to is we're reading all these inspirational, motivational quotes that tell us that we need to live out this best, greatest sense of ourselves. And they paint an employee relationship as a prison that, and those bars are preventing us from getting there.
You stepped on another, you kind of like went squoosh right by it. Another reason people will talk about, entrepreneurship being better employment is because you have complete control over all of your time, and of course there's a beam out there of like, yeah, you get to work any, 18 hours a day that you want.
Work 125 hours a week to make money while you sleep.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's actually truer than what people think it is. And that's, I think, a piece that we also miss is that we believe the only way to have flexibility is to be self-employed, to be entrepreneurial. But that's really no longer the case. Mm-hmm. I mean, the right environment will totally allow for the type of flexibility that you want. You may have to look harder for it. It's not just like going to be.
Right. I mean, that is the thing, is that everything has a trade-off, right? Like I will say in my field, because I am somebody who is I'm always looking at who's hiring in my field, partially because I do train people to do what I do. And so I want to be able to give good advice on, does it make sense for you to try to be like me and do this hanging out your shingle? Or does it make sense for you to spend a few years doing this for somebody else, learning how it works in that environment, whatever, what are the transferable skills? And I'm always seeing, a very rigid flexibility, right? Like the flexibility is you get, one Friday off a month to do whatever you want. Now, for some people, some entrepreneurs, they haven't had a Friday off in 10 years. Now they convince themselves they could take every Friday off if they wanted to. So that one Friday off a month doesn't sound so great to them. But, one Friday off a month might be really, really nice for you. Other people, I'm in a situation where I'm the person who takes my kids to and from school. My only employment option would have to make that possible. And they're just wonky windows of time, right? But it doesn't mean that there's no employer out there who wouldn't be willing to let me work 9 to 2 every single day and a Saturday to make up for it and still pay me a full-time salary. In fact, I bet there are several that would be willing to do that, right? To have a Saturday worker in this line of work, because a lot of people in my line of work do not work Saturdays.
Right.
But part of it though, Gwen, is that, first of all, it's very easy to tell yourself that that is impossible. No opportunity like that exists if you're not looking.
If you're not looking. Exactly.
And can we just be blunt and say some people are so scared to look because they think even entertaining the question makes them a failure.
Well, and to me, that's the big piece of why would that be a failure? And the thing that I talk about a lot is maybe this is the best answer for this season.
Because you can always make a different decision later. You were the one who taught me that, Gwen.
Yeah, because you can make a different decision later. Right. And, you and I both have done, our own business, entrepreneurial gigs, freelance work and corporate work at different points in time. And as I was saying before we actually got on the podcast was I actually liked them all for different reasons. And so if someone says, oh my God, you must hate the thought of ever going back to corporate, it's like, not necessarily. Like there's certain environments that I would absolutely not want to be a part of. I know that.
Right.
But it doesn't mean corporate, working for a larger organization and being part of a larger team is like, oh God, I couldn't possibly do that. It's like, no, I could totally see that. I could totally see doing that. And, going back to just doing freelance for somebody else, it's like, totally see that. I could see being an independent contractor doing, particular type of work for only 1 or 2 clients. I could totally see that. I mean, like all of these are possibilities, but it's because I don't hold so tightly to if I'm not an entrepreneur, I'm a failure.
Right.
And I think, the bigger issue here is and I also think this is another one kind of United States thing. We get so, tied up and associated with whatever work title we have, that when that work title changes, we don't have enough self-identity in and of ourselves that's separate from our work identity. Right. That we're like, yeah, but we're still useful and valuable and, you know, all those things, even if we're not doing whatever that work identity is.
Yes.
Right. And, you know, we were talking about what defines an entrepreneur. As I say that, I think that's also part of what defines an entrepreneur is they're not defined by whatever work they're doing at the time, because it's at the time.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you know, we talk about like serial entrepreneurs, right?
Right.
And I think, you know, it's gotten a little messy in later years because of the personal brand aspect, right? So that you become like, you're the planner expert, you know, in your case, you're the accountability expert, right? I'm the communities expert. And it's funny, as I remember somebody reaching out to me, they were trying to sell me something. And, you know, I was picking up a lot of fractional CMO work, right? Well, people like you hiring me to be their marketing officer. And this person used that because I had introduced myself in a networking group. And I said, you know, at my heart, like I'm passionate about online communities. I'm a communities expert. But I found myself recently picking up a lot of marketing officer clients. And so she used that to reach out to me and say, well, I know you're in the middle of a big pivot. And so, you know, what I do is, you know, I specialize in helping people to walk their way through pivots. And I was like, who said I'm in the middle of a pivot? And she said, well, you know, you're moving away from community. I was like, no, I will never move away from community. If I got a job tomorrow as a school teacher, I would still be designing communities on the side somewhere. I don't care if I have to design them at 2 a.m. I will never leave that. I'm just saying that this community focus of mine has actually attracted some very relationship-centered entrepreneurs who have brought me on to support them with their marketing efforts because they don't like funnels and whatever. But this is not a pivot. I'm not moving from one thing to the other. I'm doing this other thing actually to support my work over here.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And that's part of the entrepreneur thing. You know, entrepreneurs, like I know a guy, he owns a chemical company. He owns a laundromat. He's like thinking about like buying into this retail shop, but it's really because his daughter wants to be a fashion designer. And he was like, well, you know, designing clothes is one thing, selling clothes is another thing. So maybe if we do this retail shop, she can get a sense of what it's like to sell clothes, what people want. Because, you know, she can design all day in a vacuum. That doesn't mean anything's ever going to go to market. Right? He's got his finger in all these pies. And you know what? At some point in time, he's going to sell all those and he's going to go buy something else.
Yep.
I can't tell you what it is. I just know that that is what he will do because that is what he always does.
And he's not that interested in running any of those.
No, you know what drives him more than anything is optimizing businesses. So what he likes to do is he likes to buy these businesses that have a pretty decent profit margin. And then he likes to figure out how can he grow the bottom line, right? How does he make it bigger without growing the expenses and all of that stuff? Like he just loves to truly scale operations. And if after 5 or 6 years he finds it doesn't scale, he loses interest and he moves on to something else. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's not interested in knowing the name of every driver in the chemical company. He doesn't care who comes in and uses the laundromat. But you know what? His general manager of the laundromat, because he's in the laundromat only when something breaks, his general manager in the laundromat loves that Sue comes in every Friday and loves having conversations with Sue about her life as she's washing her clothes. Right. Two entirely different people.
And so to me, that real entrepreneur is... Well, using the term that Mike Michalowicz uses, is a shareholder in the business.
Right.
They might be the sole shareholder in the business. Right. But a lot of us are entrepreneurial, but we're really business runners. Mm-hmm. Right. We own the business. What we're really doing is running the business.
Right.
And we like it. There's nothing wrong with that. But I don't see, you know, like I said, I'm going to use myself as an example. I don't see me owning 18 different types of businesses. It's got to be something that I actually understand. I want to be able to think about how I would run it. And, you know, like I've got to be more in it. And so am I entrepreneurial? Yes. Am I an entrepreneur as we're defining it? I don't think so.
So why do you think it's such a testament to failure to go from entrepreneurship to becoming an employee? Because we're seeing a lot of people do that. I mean, the fact is we launched this podcast because I had been watching people who left entrepreneurship to become employees to then get laid off and try to resurrect their businesses. And, and talking about like part of resurrecting their business, of course, part of building that personal brand was talking about what led them to leave their business in the first place and now why they were coming back. So why do you think it is such a mark of failure to say, hey, I want to be an employee, or hey, I want a guaranteed paycheck?
Because it makes it feel like we weren't good enough. We weren't capable enough. We, fill in any of those, kinds of words. And back to, that's not true. It's just, it's just not true. Entrepreneurs, real entrepreneurs will fail a lot. Mm-hmm. Things will go disastrously bad. Mm-hmm. And they'll go and do something similar, usually something different, but, but similar again and again and again. And we say, if we fail and we say, I don't want to deal with this again, we're calling it an actual failure. And it's like, no, you just learned something new.
Right. Well, and let's also be honest, is a lot of people shift from entrepreneurship to getting a job to bail out their businesses financially. And I think that's also why it feels like a failure, because very few people have the 6-figure, monthly recurring revenue business and then go, I think I want to go get a job.
Right. Yeah. It's usually gone very poorly, and or they've gotten it there and they've realized, like, I don't want to be responsible for mouths to feed. I don't want to, these are not actually things that I want to do. And owning that you don't want to do it feels like a failure, because it's like, but you should. It means you're real. And it's like, no, it just means that this is not the thing that you're actually cut out to do.
Yeah.
And that's
and
okay.
So what I would say, kind of to close us up here, is that first things first, if you get nothing else from this episode, get that it is totally fine to be an employee. Okay. So like, just making sure that where both Gwen and I stand. We think being an employee is just as honorable as being an entrepreneur, and being a business owner is just as honorable as both. And if you're somebody who wants to set your business aside for a while and take some orders for that guaranteed or dedicated paycheck, no harm, no foul. You don't owe anybody anything, right? Like, you get to feed your family in whatever way makes sense for you. Now, if you're listening, you're like, I still don't know. Am I an entrepreneur? Am I meant to be an employee? I'm not quite sure where I land. I think reflection is the best way to figure it out. And you know what you could do is you could subscribe to Gwen's one really good question email, and you do that at everydayeffectiveness.com/question, but her really good question email, and answer it from either perspective. Answer it like, okay, so I've got this great question. How do I answer this as an entrepreneur? How would I answer this if I was an employee? And see what comes easier. Because you might find out that even if you're an entrepreneur, even if you have a responsibility for a team, your default mindset is that of an employee. And that's okay. It's totally okay. The main thing is you can only have the business you really want by living a business in alignment with what you want in all aspects of your life. All right. We'll see you next time, where we will probably pick at this scab or another scab like it just as much, because that's what we do around here. Thanks for tuning in to The Business You Really Want with Gwen Bortner. I'm Tonya Kubo, reminding you that sustainable success is within reach. Make sure to subscribe to the show and visit thebusinessyoureallyWant.com for more resources. Until next time, keep dreaming big and acting with intention.